This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore. The headlines. Japan's share index, the Nikkei 225, sinks more than 4% in early trade, its lowest level since the end of October. This was after falls on Wall Street, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropping by almost 1,200 points, its biggest one-day drop since the 2008 financial turmoil.
I'm Sharon Lail in London. Also on the programme, US Vice President Mike Pence begins his journey to the Winter Olympics in South Korea as he seeks to counter warming ties with North Korea. In 1987, she blew up a South Korean plane. The BBC speaks to a former North Korean spy about the country she was once prepared to kill for.
Live from our studios in Singapore and London. This is BBC World News. It's Newsday.
Glad you could join us. It's 9 in the morning here in Singapore, 1 a.m. in London, and 9 a.m. in Tokyo, where Japan's Nikkei 225 stock index has sunk more than 4% in early trading. Well, the malaise has spread to Asian markets after share prices plummeted in the United States. As you can see, the Nikkei 225 down to 21,651 and the All Ordinaries Index at 5,949. And Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index will start trading in about half an hour's time. It will start at 32,245. Well, the fall in the Asian stock markets is the steepest in over a year, due to fears that a surging U.S. economy will lead to sharp interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve, sparking speculation that central banks globally might be forced to tighten policy more aggressively. Shifting our attention to the U.S. markets and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, finishing nearly 5% down, dropping by more than 1,100 points. It is the biggest one-day fall since the financial crisis a decade ago. The tech-laced Nasdaq Composite Index also down by 3.9% overnight to 6,967. For more now on the Japanese markets, let's speak now to the BBC's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, who joins us now live from Tokyo. If it's the market in Japan, Rupert, a lot of volatility. When it opened, it was down by 4%. It trimmed some of those losses, was down by just 1.8%. Now it's back to 4% down. This market is indeed volatile and coming off 26-year highs.
Yes, it is, Rico, and I have to say that despite this, people are relatively calm here about what's going on. There is a feeling that the Japanese market is following what's going on in the United States. There's sort of a herd mentality in stock markets around the world. When the US stock market starts to fall, everybody else sort of joins in. So everybody was expecting large falls again on the Nikkei this morning, and that's indeed what we have seen. But the underlying feeling, the sentiment, if you like, about the Japanese economy and the US economy is that the fundamentals of these economies are good. And in fact, the large falls that we've seen in America on Friday and again on Monday are on the back of actually good economic data. They're based on the fact that jobs are growing more than expected, wages are rising faster than expected, and that is leading to an anticipation that the Fed is going to have to raise interest rates. But fundamentally, the US economy is growing fast, jobs are growing fast, and that this is, on the whole, good news.
But with this panic selling in the US markets, investors usually shift their funds to the safe haven Japanese yen during times of uncertainty. And when the Japanese yen is strong, it also hurts corporate profits, particularly of exporters.
Yeah, that's, I guess, the one concern for Japan in all of this is, as we've started to see already, is whenever anybody gets nervous, whenever the world's stock markets look like they are, as they are today, volatile, people tend to move money into yen, and that's started to happen, and the yen has started to strengthen. It was around 110 on Friday. It's now down to, I think, around 109 to the dollar, and that, if it continues over a long period of time, will have an impact on Japanese exports and on, of course, repatriated profits from Japanese companies overseas, where a lot of Japanese companies actually earn most of their money in the US, in China, elsewhere, where they manufacture and they repatriate those profits in dollars. Converting into yen means they have less money. So that is a long-term concern. But I think we have to remember the Nikkei has, the Dow in the US has been on a very, very long, unbroken bull run. In 2017, the Dow did not fall more than 2% in any single day. It is at record highs, and it is now what market analysts call going through a correction, and that there is no need for anybody to panic about this.
And of course, the Nikkei 225 is also correcting from 26-year highs. Has the government said anything about these current falls and the state of the Japanese economy?
Yeah, we saw the central bank, the Japanese central bank, come out yesterday after the initial falls and to state that its belief is that the Japanese fundamentals of the Japanese economy are strong, that Japanese corporate profits are high, and also that its easy money policy, its policy of quantitative easing, will continue. And then, of course, Japan does not face the same sort of upward pressures on prices that the US economy is facing. Inflation is very low here. Wages are not rising. In fact, the Japanese government wants wages and inflation to rise, so it would like to see a bit of what the US is getting at the moment in the Japanese economy too.
Thank you so much for that update on the Japanese stock market. Rupert Winkle-Hayes there, joining us from Tokyo, and we will have our Asia business correspondent Karishma Vaswani in about 10 minutes' time to tell us the overall impact of this fall in U.S. stocks on Asian equities.
Well, let's take a look now at some of the day's other news. The South Korean President Moon Jae-in says he hopes North Korea's participation in the Winter Olympics will lead to broader peace in the region. The North's decision to send a senior leader to the Olympics has prompted speculation of possible talks on non-sporting issues at the Games, which begin in Pyeongchang on Friday. And that's where my colleague Stephen McDonnell is, and he told us about the excitement building ahead of the Games.
We're waiting to host the Winter Olympics in the coming days in these mountains, and already international political events are really overshadowing the sport. There are three main players here. I guess you've got North Korea, you've got South Korea, and you've got the US administration. Now, Moon Jae-in's administration, they're hoping that there will be talks surrounding the Games with this visiting North Korean delegation, and you've got the US Vice President here with his group of North Korean defectors kind of trying to poo-poo the whole thing, if you like. And what's interesting is that while the North Koreans, you can imagine the hope that they'd be able to talk freely with South Koreans and the like, the North Korean team is doing everything it can to keep its people away from the more general community. So the joint women's hockey team, for example, the North Korean players, they stay in another place. There's a team of North Korean performers who are coming. Now, they arrive on a ferry. They'll get off the ferry, go into a performance space, go back onto the ferry, stay there, eat there. So again, they won't be mixing with the more general population. I guess critics would say this is kind of par for the course for North Korea in the way they do things. But these types of things are what the whole Olympic myth is built around. People really hope that for at least 2 weeks we can all stop fighting with one another, and that former enemies can become friends and the like. Well, we'll just have to wait and see in the coming weeks, and in fact into the future, if these Games do bring a sort of greater dialogue between North and South Korea and open up channels of communication which just weren't there.
And that was Stephen McDonnell speaking to me earlier. Also making news today, the sole surviving suspect of the Paris attacks in 2015 has gone on trial in Belgium in a separate case linked to his arrest in Brussels. 9-year-old Salah Abdeslam is accused of attempting to murder police officers during a gun battle 4 months after the Paris attacks. The former president of the Maldives, Maumoon Abdul Gayoom, has been arrested shortly after a 15-day state of emergency was declared. This amateur footage that was posted on social media shows the moment he was taken away. The political crisis was triggered when President Abdullah Yameen refused to comply with a Supreme Court order. And the former US gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar has been sentenced to an additional 40 years to bring his total prison term to 125 years. The sentence relates to the sexual abuse of young female athletes. Nassar carried out the abuse over 2 decades under the guise of medical treatment. Now let's take a look at some funny footage, because this is a greedy dog's efforts to try to steal some leftover pancakes at a home in the US state of Massachusetts. But it almost went horribly wrong, and that's after it accidentally ignited the stove, causing something on top of it to ignite. Now luckily the alarm system alerted first responders before any serious damage was done. So a lucky escape.
Let's get more now on the impact of the latest U.S. stock market fall here in Asia. And with me is our Asia business correspondent, Karishma Vaswani. You know, we spoke an hour earlier, and the losses were not as steep as it is at this hour. The Nikkei 225 Dow down by about 5%.
Yeah, and you're seeing a similar reaction in Korea as well, and I expect across the trading day here in Asia, you will see similar falls. Now, you know, Rico, every time we have a big story like this out of the United States where markets fall there, and, you know, not to underplay the significance of this, you do see corresponding falls out here in Asia. And that's easily explained by the fact that, you know, what happens in the U.S. economy and U.S. stock markets is obviously the key indicator for a lot of Asian investors as well. Don't forget that over the last 10 years, during that era of cheap money, when U.S. interest rates were at record lows back in the U.S., a lot of those foreign funds came into Asian markets and bought emerging market stocks, which helped to see valuations here grow up. So there's a lot of nervousness around that, Rico. But it must be said that, you know, we haven't seen strong economic fundamentals like this, both in the United States and out here in Asia, for the better part of the last 10 years. You've got wages rising marginally in the U.S., in Japan as well, a country that for the longest time was stuck in a spiral of low or no growth and no wage growth, and now is seeing better economic fundamentals. So a lot of the traders and economists are saying to me that, hold on, let's just take a moment to take a deep breath and look at the economic fundamentals in both these economies, in both the U.S. and Asia. Things are better than they were expected to be. So really, don't get too anxious just as yet.
And markets cannot just go straight up. And some traders are even saying this is a healthy correction, because since Donald Trump took office, the Dow Jones Industrial Average has been up more than 30%, and the S&P 500 23%. And many of the Asian markets are at multi-year highs.
Absolutely, Rico. A healthy correction is a phrase that I've heard a lot recently. And actually, if you look at this, it's the positive economic news that has caused this market correction. Many traders looking at the U.S. Central Bank, whose job it is to tweak interest rates to ensure that the economy isn't growing too fast or too slowly. It's a sort of Goldilocks scenario. And they're saying, okay, jobs growth is doing a little bit better. Wage growth is doing a little bit better. We're expecting the U.S. Central Bank to raise interest rates faster than we thought they might earlier in the year. And in preparation for that, that's why you're seeing a little bit of this market sell-off and this healthy correction, as you so rightly put it. So I think that's what we will see in the few days ahead in this trading week. But fundamentally, economic growth in both the Asia and the United States is still strong.
And briefly, will these fundamentals mean higher interest rates for Asia? You have the likes of Australia having a monetary policy meeting today. You have the Philippines and India later this week. And of course, Korea has also raised interest rates late last year. Could this be the start of more interest rate hikes because we're more fundamentally sound?
Well, Rico, that's the difficult balance that many Asian central banks need to basically create in order to keep in step with the U.S. economy. They have to make sure that their economies aren't growing too slowly, and so in order to do that, they have to sometimes cut interest rates. But at the same time, if you see the central bank in the U.S. raising rates, they will be in a very difficult position as to decide what to go ahead to make sure that their economic fundamentals remain strong. So that's certainly an area where we will be watching in the months ahead.
All right. Thank you so much for your insights on why this market is falling and economic fundamentals in Asia and in the U.S. Our very own Asia business correspondent, Karishma Vaswani. And you're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London. Still to come on the program. A rare insight into the cult of the Kim dynasty from the North Korean agent who blew up a Korean Airlines plane in 1987.
This is the moment that millions in Iran have been waiting for. After his long years in exile, the first hesitant steps of Ayatollah Khomeini on Iranian soil.
South Africa's white government has offered its black opponents concessions unparalleled in the history of apartheid. The ban on the African National Congress is lifted immediately, and the ANC leader Nelson Mandela, after 27 years in jail, is to be set free unconditionally.
The aircraft was returning from Belgrade, where Manchester United had entered the semi-final of the European Cup.
2 Americans have become the first humans to walk in space without any lifeline to their spaceship. One of them called it a piece of cake.
Thousands of people have given the yachtswoman Ellen MacArthur a spectacular homecoming in the Cornish port of Falmouth after she smashed the world record for sailing solo around the world non-stop.
You're watching Newsday on the BBC. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
That's right. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Sharon Jitlale in London. Our top stories. Japan's Nikkei index sinks more than 4% in early trade, its lowest level since the end of October.
There have been further sharp falls in share prices in the United States, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average down nearly 5%. And this has been the most watched on BBC.com. An investigation has revealed thousands of British people sold timeshares in the 1980s are now trapped in the arrangement, and it's costing them hundreds of pounds in fees each year. Timeshares are a holiday property investment that was popular at that time. Let's now take a look at some of the front pages from around the world, and we start off with the Financial Times and reports on the turmoil in the global financial markets, with this photo showing the main indices all in the red. These were the closing numbers on Monday. Now they've plunged even further. The Nikkei 225 down by around 5%, and the Kospi Index 3%. And this gives more information on why there's been such a decline, saying investors are worried the global recovery is reviving long dormant inflationary pressures on wages and prices. Shifting our attention to the Philippine Daily Inquirer, and it leads with a warning from a Supreme Court justice that appeasing China over disputed islands in the South China Sea will not work. It says it will only embolden Beijing even further. China has angered regional rivals by building island military bases. And finally, you have the front page of the China Daily, and it has a story of an 81-year-old woman who has finally completed her bachelor's degree. You can see a photo of Xu Min-Shu smiling there with her diploma, who started her degree in 1957, but she was also working as a nurse, so she had to put it on hold until now. And in trending, which story is sparking discussions online?
Well, I can tell you that it is yet again another tweet from Donald Trump that is sparking a huge backlash. He basically tweeted that the UK's healthcare system is going broke and not working. His comments are thought to be in response to a protest in London over the weekend demanding more NHS funding. Among those who retaliated to Mr. Trump's comments was the British Health Secretary, who tweeted that he's proud of the system.
The U.S. Vice President Mike Pence is starting a trip to Asia aimed at showing solidarity with regional allies and also helping South Korea celebrate the launch of its Olympic Games. But he actually has a much tougher task, mending a potential breach with the South Korean government over how to deal with the North Korean regime of Kim Jong-un. Before he visits South Korea, he's stopping over in Japan. Earlier, I spoke to Hiro Katsumata from Tohoku University, and I asked him how significant this stopover was.
First, let me point out that the U.S.-Japan alliance is stronger than ever before under the Trump administration for many reasons. But one of the reasons is that the alliance has become important not only for Japan, but also for the US. Because North Korea has almost succeeded in developing missiles, ballistic missiles, which can target directly the US territory of Guam. So the security is becoming more serious for not only for Japan, but also for the US. Therefore, the US the Vice President Pence wants to make sure to put pressure on North Korea and to demonstrate the power, strength of the US-Japan alliance.
But Hiro-san, how worried is Japan right now on how South Korea is dealing with the North Koreans?
Well, see, Japan has always been worried about the issue of North Korea. It is a serious issue for Japan for 20 years and so on. But importantly, again, this issue is becoming important, serious, not only for US, but also not only for Japan, but also for the US. So the interest of US and Japan are converging. Therefore, the visit is quite timely and important.
There are reports right now, Hiro-san, that North Korea is planning to hijack the Korean Winter Olympic Games with a propaganda campaign. How do you think should this be handled by the Americans and the Japanese?
Okay, that's an interesting issue. That's actually a tricky issue, and certainly you are right. North Korea is trying to use this opportunity to showcase, improve its image, to project its image as a peace-loving country or whatever. But U.S. is becoming strategic as well. See, Vice President Pence does not stop by at Okinawa anyway. He is on his way to go to South Korea to attend the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. And he doesn't have to go there anyway, but he has decided to make a brief stop at Okinawa in order to remind the world that sports and security are two different issues.
Now, a North Korean spy who blew up a Korean Airlines aircraft just months before the 1988 Seoul Olympics has issued a stark warning ahead of South Korea's Winter Games. Kim Hyun-hee says the regime that recruited her and trained her to murder 115 South Koreans has not changed. She's been recounting her extraordinary story to our Seoul correspondent Laura Bicker.
She was under heavy sedation, with her mouth covered with adhesive tape.
I was told that I was on the front line to unify Korea, that I would be freeing South Korea like a revolutionary hero. I was full of pride and dignity. But I realized it was murder. Killing my own people, innocent everyday people. It was a Japanese radio, a small radio, and that's where I put the detonator. Next to it was the liquid explosive in a liquor bottle, in a plastic bag, which I placed on the shelf in the plane. In the North, we are taught that the South is a colony of America, poor and corrupt, that the U.S. is an aggressor. We are told they are the arch enemy and we cannot live under the same sky.
In a blaze of publicity this morning, the South Koreans paraded the woman they claimed was a Korean agent. Kim Hyun-hee apparently told intelligence officers she'd a Korean airliner to disrupt the Olympic Games.
Do you think right now all of this is fake? Do you think the run-up to the Olympics, the overtures of peace coming from Kim Jong-un, do you think it's fake?
Of course it is fake. The ultimate goal of North Korea is to complete its nuclear program. They have nothing in their mind but nuclear weapons. North Korea will not change through dialogue. North Korea cannot be changed by soft words. I believe only pressure will work on North Korea.
강경해야지 해결이 된다고 생각합니다.
So you have life, you have love, and now I believe you have children. Do they know what you did?
그걸 이해할 나이가 안 돼서.
My children are not old enough to know the story, and I haven't tried to tell them the details yet. But these days, with internet readily available and my interviews on media, I suspect they must know something. My son is quiet, but I think he knows.
그 사건에.
As the Burma, I have a lifelong work of atonement. It is my cross to bear for the rest of my life.
Kim Hyung-hee there. And that's it for Newsday from me and Rico. Thanks for watching.